Let us pray. Almighty God, we have called us to govern this province. We ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons die nodige wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela ilizwe lethu nabantu balo, musili ukulungu kwipondo lethu. Kosi sikelela i-Afrika, kina bantwana bayo, kokelo inkokeli zayo, iniki ukulu i-Afrika. All this we beg in your holy name. Amen. Please be seated. Order, please. Order. The Secretary will read the order of the day.
Reply to the Premier's State of the Province address.
I will now afford the Honourable the Premier an opportunity to reply to the debate. The Honourable the Premier Zille. Premier, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Speaker, you have to be very hard-hearted not to take pity on the opposition in this House. But that can't stop me from giving them the leathering that they really deserve today. Because they didn't debate the State of the Province address. They clearly didn't even listen to it. They failed to present any alternative vision, and the only things they could say was what I didn't say. But Speaker, whatever I say today can't do them nearly as much harm as they are doing to themselves. I had not even begun my address, Madam Speaker, when they were already fighting with each other. As I acknowledged the Honourable Magatla as the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Dugmore shouted out, "Not for long." It seems the Honourable Dugmore was right. Not for long. It seems the Honourable Dugmore was right, not for long, because the Honourable Magatla lasted a shorter time than Des van Rooyen. He made his first speech 2 days ago, and he is no longer here.
Premier, please take your seat. Honourable Dugmore, you're rising on.
Madam Speaker,
Order, please, members. There's a speaker on the floor.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, you know, the Premier referred towards the end of her speech to the isiXhosa dictionary. Now, I want to say in Xhosa there's a word for someone who lies. You know, it's a umxoki, uyaxoka. Because I want to ask you to ask the Premier to withdraw the statement, because let's look at Hansard.
Okay.
She's referring to some interjection. I know that I've never said those words, and she's casting aspersions on me. I would like to ask you to ask the Premier to withdraw that statement, and I would like you to consult Hansard, because she is lying and she's misleading this House.
Honourable Dugmore, sorry, Premier, please take your seat. Honourable Dugmore, that is not a point of order. It is actually a point of debate. But as you have requested, let's review Hansard and revert. So, Chief Whip Wiley.
Thank you very much, Speaker. But now can we deal with the fact that he's called the Honourable the Premier a liar? Now that's a little bit more important, and that does need action.
Thank you. Honourable Dugmore, in your closing point now, you said she is lying, and I would like to request that you withdraw that statement in the absence of us having reviewed Hansard and come back with the ruling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you be prepared to accept a withdrawal and for me to say that she was telling an untruth? Is that acceptable parliamentary language?
If you can withdraw, please, Honourable Dugmore. Thank you.
Not a negotiation.
All right, may we then proceed, members? Can I request your cooperation? If we're rising on a point of order, let it not be a spurious, frivolous point of order. I cannot entertain points of debate because I cannot talk to the factual, the integrity of a statement that is made. I'm merely here as a presiding officer to ensure that procedurally we are correct. So if it's a point of debate, please consider before you jump up and say it's a point of order. You may proceed, Honourable Premier.
May I address you on that, Madam Speaker? Because when people have points of order, they must get up and say under what point in the rule they are raising a point of order. And that is absolutely critical. Otherwise, by the time you rule somebody out of order,
please.
They've already made a speech. Thank you, Madam
Noted,
Speaker.
Premier, you may proceed.
Now, whether or not Hansard picked it up, I heard it clearly and wrote it down in my shorthand notes, because Hansard often doesn't pick up interjections. Hansard often doesn't pick up interjections. The Honourable Magakla stood here, and I said to him, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and as clear as crystal, the Honourable Dugmore said, not for long. And now he isn't here. And the Honourable Dugmore is now determined to try and set it right, what he said then, because there is such infighting in the ranks of the ANC that he'll be the next one out because he said that about the Honourable Magakla. And I heard it as clear as a bell. No, wait, it's coming. It's coming. But the Honourable Dugmore was quite right when he said the Honourable Magakla wouldn't be here for long, because he hasn't been. He may be outside addressing the masses of 35 people, but he certainly is not in this House today. And I would like, in his absence, to extend my sympathies to the Honourable Magakla, because on his very first appearance in this House as Leader of the Opposition, he's being stabbed in the back by his own colleagues. The ANC, Madam Speaker, brings new meaning to the well-known phrase in politics that in politics, your opponents sit opposite you, but your enemies sit next to you or behind you. And that is what is going on in those benches. I do take note of it. Now, when the ANC made their speeches,
Order, please,
it
members.
had absolutely nothing to do with the State of the Province address. They were reading, Madam Speaker, they were reading from their election script. And their election script goes like this, in a sentence. Their governance record is so awful everywhere they govern, and they have so fundamentally failed to build a capable state, that the only thing they have left, Madam Speaker, is to divide South Africans on the basis of race and put the majority against minorities. That is all they have left. And more people see through this, and the more people see through it, the louder they shout. But it is just like crying wolf, they have no credibility left on this particular issue. So I wasn't surprised at all, Madam Speaker, when the Honourable Magakla cried racism in response to my speech. And listen to what he said, because it was quite extraordinary. He said, racial prejudice runs through every paragraph, sentence, and full stop of Zilla's speech. He obviously forgot to read between the lines as well, Madam Speaker. He didn't listen to a single word I said, because everything I said was about how we can redress the legacy of the past and empower all our citizens.
Order, please, members.
And Madam Speaker, he picked as the very worst example of racism from my speech the fact that I expressed my delight and surprise at the high takeout of books in our excellent library facilities in Khayelitsha. Now, I would like to recommend to the Honourable Magakla, I don't know if he's the ex-leader of the opposition, but he's certainly not here today. The Honourable Magakla, you must be worried because you had a prediction that he wouldn't last long. But there he sits, or not as the case may be, and I would like to recommend to him that he takes us to the Human Rights Commission for providing excellent library facilities in Khayelitsha. Because he obviously sees this as an example of racist white violence. Now, let me tell you that I went to look up the comparative statistics of library and library usage in South Africa, Madam Speaker, and it is this. According to a research report that surveyed all the libraries across South Africa, the book takeout per year, and the last year measured was 2013, the book takeout per year in the Western Cape is over 20 million per year. The next closest is Gauteng with less than half, 9 million. But you know what the Eastern Cape is? Less than 1 million. It's 817,000. I don't celebrate that. I celebrate the fact that in Khayelitsha, people have libraries to go to. That is what I celebrate, and you call that racist. You call that racist when I'm celebrating the fact that people in Khayelitsha have libraries to go to.
Order, please, members. Honourable Premier.
It's a national tragedy what's going on in the Eastern Cape.
Premier, please take your seat.
You see, I knew that the ANC would find a way of calling me racist by showing this comparison.
Honourable Premier, please take your seat. Members, honourable members, can I call your attention, please? We can have interjection, we can even have heckling, but you cannot drown out the speaker. Now, on this last point, there was so much noise that even I had to battle to hear. So interjections are allowed, but we cannot have a running commentary. Premier, if you don't mind, I'd like you to address the chair. Please speak to me. And order, please, members. Can I ask every member in this House to be honourable and dignified and maintain some sense of dignity and decorum? Members, please. Premier, you may proceed.
So as I predicted, sticking to their script, Madam Speaker, when I expressed delight that our libraries are being so well used in Khayelitsha, I am a racist. And when I point out that the Eastern Cape's library use is less than 1 million compared to 20 million in the Western Cape, I'm also accused of racism. It's heads, they win, tails, we lose. That's how they work it on this race debate. You see, our library facilities in Khayelitsha reflect the very opposite of racism. It reflects how much we care for the poor and their access to facilities. Now, I'm addressing you, Madam Speaker, but I hear an interjection like I hear all the interjections from the Honourable Dugmore, even though he doesn't think I do. But I listen to them because he says the truth when he's interjecting and thinks that people can't hear him. So he said, who built those libraries? Now, the best used library in Khayelitsha is the one that was built with funds from the Carnegie Corporation that I negotiated while I was mayor of Cape Town. And it is a magnificent library.
You never even built
with, no, I'm coming to him. I'm coming to him in a moment. I'm coming to him. I haven't even started yet. He's already wailing. Madam Speaker, that library project with all of the IT infrastructure and everything else was so successful that Carnegie agreed to fund a second library in Khayelitsha. And now Khayelitsha has 7 libraries. And that is why we have such a wonderful takeout of books in those magnificent facilities. And the ANC calls that racist. The ANC calls that racist, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, if you would like a really racist speech, and if I can refer the ANC to a really racist speech, I would like to remind them of their own president's infamous "I am not an African" speech. Do you remember that one? He said when he was speaking on the ANC's election manifesto, no less, he said that he was defending e-tolls because He said we must stop defending, we must defend e-tolls and we must stop attacking e-tolls when he...
Order, please.
I'm giving you an example.
Honourable Premier, please take your seat. Members, if I can address you on a point of clarity, in case we don't know where we are today. Today is the reply to the Premier's State of the Province address. How the Premier chooses to respond is her right, but I'm requesting that if there's a speaker on the floor, please manage yourself so that we don't have to constantly interrupt, because interjection is allowed, but we're getting far too much heckling coming from the other side. Please, members, I am appealing to you to cooperate. Thank you. You may proceed, Premier.
I was saying, Madam Speaker, that the ANC clearly does not know what racism is. And I'm going to give them an example of a racist speech. And it is their own president's speech, his "I am not an African" speech, which he gave when he was defending e-tolls. And he said, we must stop thinking like Africans, he said. We can't think like Africans in Africa. And then he said, this is not some national road in Malawi. That's racism, and it came from their president. It's also xenophobic.
Order, please.
Now, may I, through you, Madam Speaker, address the members of the House on that side and say, Hikaka aliziva kunuka. Hikaka aliziva kunuka. Dicho kuni.
Order, please, members.
The ANC must stop their double standards, Madam Speaker. They must stop their double standards because they must sweep before their own door before they call anyone else racist without any shred of evidence. You see, you're racist if you refer to race, but you are more racist if you take race out of the analysis and talk about the reading of books, then you're more racist. But you know, Madam Speaker, I feel sorry for them because they are a party being torn apart by racism. Absolutely torn apart by racism. You know, as jy agter die deur staan, soek jy ander ook daar.
Order, please, members.
Madam Speaker, I would like you to listen to what their own members say about them. This was on Facebook just the other day. And it
Order,
came...
please. Honourable Lecker, can I please ask you to refrain from constant heckling? You may proceed.
It came from one of their own city councillors in the city of Cape Town on Facebook, Madam Speaker. And it says, after the manner in which the ANC has treated our leader Marius Fransman, and now the PEC as well as the Youth League PEC's latest statement, I am terminating my ANC membership. It is over. I have had enough.
Order.
If Marius, my leader, starts his own party, which I hope he does, we will join that. But if that does not happen, I am taking myself and all my comrades to the DA. Then he says, the ANC is a
Order,
racist and prejudiced party. He's quite right. Took him a while to realize that, but he's quite right. It has something against our leaders. And this is what a member of their own caucus in the city of Cape Town is saying. I always asked myself, will the ANC ever have a coloured leader? Because a coloured is black in South Africa, but every day I realize it will never happen. I am sorry, friends, enough is enough. That is what is going on in the ANC. No, that's what you are doing.
Order,
that comes
please.
straight out of your caucus. Straight out of your caucus. In the DA,
Order, please,
in the
members.
DA, Madam Speaker, a white person can be a leader, a black person can be a leader, a coloured person can be a leader, but in the ANC only one race can be a leader. How racist is that? Now, you know, I've got pages and pages
Order,
and
please.
pages.
Members. Honourable
Madam
members.
Speaker, I have pages of similar things. Another lady says, this is an attack on coloured people. You are blatantly and openly discriminating against a coloured man who has not been formally charged, whilst others like Andile Lili, who has a murder case hanging over his head and who is out on bail, is still in the ANC structures. That's what he's saying. And then somebody else says...
Order, please. Members, Honourable Premier, please take your seat. Members, you are drowning out the Speaker. I can understand that you have a need to respond, but let's do it in a dignified manner so that we don't drown out the Speaker, please. You cannot constantly just keep responding. Please, members, honourable members. You may
Hulle
proceed.
kry baie seer, Speaker. Another worker from Grabo wrote this. It is not at all. This is an ANC website. It is a great concern this morning when ordinary Apple factory workers, while waiting for their transport to Grabo, communicated their disgust and disapproval about Fransman's removal by the ANC. Furthermore, I was told in no uncertain terms that if this is the way how the ANC deals with coloured leaders, they won't vote. An elderly lady said, hulle dieselfde met Rasool gedoen, nou maak hulle dieselfde met Fransman. Hulle maase. Comrades, this is serious. The electorate are not stupid.
Order, please, members. Honourable Premier.
And I could go
Can you
on
please
and
take
on.
your seat? There's
Speaker,
a member on a point of order.
Order. We cannot hear anything at the back with those three members out there. They are just unbelievable.
Thank you, Honourable Schaefer. Members, can we pause for 5 seconds and just try and regain our composure? And hold on. Honourable members, Honourable Dugmore, I'm requesting cooperation. Chief Whip Ace, can I please ask that you manage your caucus, because we are clearly now getting to be disorderly. Interjections are allowed, but we cannot drown out the Speaker, please.
I'll address you, please, Speaker.
You may.
Speaker, this site was very calm, and really we're here to listen. But the way the Premier behaved, misbehaved, I mean, let's be honest. You don't behave like this.
Okay.
Definitely, and that was misbehaving.
I hear your point, Honourable Ace, except the Premier is responding to the issues that were raised. Hold on. It is not my place to interject in what the content is. Members, this is a response. You might not like what you hear, but you need to afford the Premier the opportunity to present. Now, can I please request your cooperation, please? Honourable
Speaker, may I
Diana,
address you, please?
Chief Whip Wali.
Speaker, we've been going on now for over 20 minutes, most of which has been based on you ruling from the chair to try and get order in the House. I really must appeal to you that if the members on the other side are not interested, they're free to go at any time that they want, but we must ask that if they are not prepared to abide by your ruling, then we must go over to the next process.
Thank you, Chief Whip Wali. Honourable members, if I can the debate is wide-ranging, same as the responses were on Tuesday, and there is no prescription on how strongly the Premier makes a point. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the response. So can we please cooperate and allow the Speaker, the Premier, to continue with the presentation? You may proceed, Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. May I, through you, address the other side of the House by saying, when it comes to race and racism, chayela kwako kukala. Chayela kwako kukala. That's what you need to do. Now, I'm not tukaying at all. I'm telling you to sweep before your own door first.
Order, please, members.
Now, the ANC, Madam Speaker, come here with a culturally appropriated phrase taken from the United States of America, with a phrase that everybody agrees with, Black Lives Matter, but when we say all lives matter, they say that's racist. But in fact, the ANC comes here and says that Black Lives Matter, but everywhere they govern as if Black lives don't matter at all. At all. And I'm not only referring, Madam Speaker, to grotesque abuses such as we saw at the massacre of Marikana. I'm talking about daily governance under the ANC. Now, teachers are supposed to care, and they're supposed to believe that young black lives really matter. In fact, teachers are supposed to believe that all lives matter, Madam Speaker. But there was an oversight visit that was addressed in the National Assembly by our Shadow Minister of Education there. And they were in an oversight visit of rural schools in KwaZulu-Natal, where you would think that young black lives really mattered to the teachers. But the government officials told the MPs how SATU teachers drop their own children off at former Model C schools and then go on strike for the day, Madam Speaker. And one district director described this as the highest level of cruelty. I suppose Black Lives Matter to the SATU teachers in that school. And then we heard how in the Ugu district, there was no teaching, and this is in answer to the Honourable Dugmore, in the whole of the Ugu district, there was no teaching for 7 months over the last 2 years because of a dispute between SATU and the district director. 7 months, no teaching, but Black Lives Matter. And so I can go on and on and on, Madam Speaker. It's an absolute disgrace.
Order, please,
Now,
members.
no wonder the only card they have to play is the race card, but they should make it apply to them. Uthula iculo elinye. Inomdinsi. Now, the Honourable Dugmore, as I recall, also praised the Honourable Premier Makura. He's back. He's back. I think he has been addressing the masses outside of 35 people. Welcome the Leader of the Opposition back, even though it's going to be short-lived.
Honourable Lecker, can I please address you? You've been constantly going there. Can you please try and retain your composure, please? I know, but please try and manage that emotion. Unfortunately, we can't dictate that. Please manage yourself, Honourable Lecker.
Now, the Honourable Dugmore also praised the Honourable Makura for giving a visionary speech. And of course, I went to look at this visionary speech. And indeed, it might interest, now that the Honourable Magakla is here, who said I made a very long speech, it may interest the Honourable Magakla to know that Premier Makura's speech was a full 2,000 words longer than mine. And the biggest news, Madam Speaker, the biggest news reported from Premier Makura's speech, wait for it, was that the ANC was stopping the further rollout of e-tolls. That was the biggest news. The biggest news when an ANC office bearer speaks, the biggest news that is reported when an ANC official speaks is that they are trying to fix the mess they created in the first place, Madam Speaker. Just like poor Minister Gordon had to do yesterday, fix the mess they created in the first place. And that is what Premier Makura spent his whole speech doing, fixing the mess they created in the first place. And I was trying to think of a metaphor for this, Madam Speaker. And I think the best one, and I hope this is parliamentary, but I'm sure you will allow me a lot of leeway because I could say this outside the chamber, so I'm sure we must have more freedom of speech inside this chamber. I think the ANC is like a person who wets his bed every night and then thinks that changing the sheets will solve the problem. But after a while, if you do that every night, Madam Speaker, the springs start to get rusty. The springs underneath get rusty, and then it doesn't help to change the sheets anymore. The governing party has done this so often and tried to fix it by changing the sheets that the entire institutional infrastructure of South Africa has now rusted and is falling apart. And then they call it visionary to change the sheets again. I think that the Honourable Dugmore was alluding to the Honourable Makura's references to race when he said it was a visionary speech. Transformation and equity. Let me come to that. He said exactly 2 paragraphs on race out of a 12,883-word speech. And this is what he said. I'm coming to economic empowerment in a minute.
Order, please.
This is what he said. Let us fight against racism wherever and whenever it manifests itself. I agree with that. We all agree with that. I say it every day of my life, and more than that, I have lived my entire life like that. And then I also agree with his next sentence. Those who call black people baboons are as wrong as those who threaten to drive white students out of university campuses. There must be no room for racists in the South Africa of our dreams, of course. Again, fine words. The ANC's problem, Madam Speaker, is not with words. It is translating words into deeds. That is what they can't do. Because what did the Honourable Makura propose after making that fine-sounding statement? What did he actually propose to do? His visionary solution to racism is to appoint an eminent persons group of unknown people to work with various unspecified civil society initiatives to open honest and constructive conversations on how we can build a society free from racism and xenophobia. Now, at least here, the Honourable Chacham, at least here, learners can draw books from a library in Khayelitsha, unlike anywhere in the Eastern Cape. Now, 800,000 books drawn in a year in the Eastern Cape. Yes, that's 800,000. How many of those were drawn by black children? Right. I suggest that this eminent persons group starts by looking at Gauteng, because that is the province that most needs to combat racism. Madam Speaker, the Human Rights Report, the Human Rights Commission report from last year, has been quoted in Business Tech in a list of South Africa's most racist provinces. And guess what, Madam Speaker? Gauteng tops the list with 121 complaints of racism just last year. And the whole of the Western Cape was way behind with 29. 121 complaints to the Human Rights Commission of racism from Gauteng, 29 from the Western Cape. Even KwaZulu-Natal is almost double the number of complaints that the Western Cape had. Now, if there were 29 in the Western Cape, it is still 29 too many, Madam Speaker. It is still. But I would also very much like to know how many of those 29 complaints from the Western Cape were actually found to be valid and upheld. We don't talk so much, we do. If he really wants to do something about racism, if he really wants to do something about racism, he can start doing what we have done in the Western Cape and in Cape Town. You see, Madam Speaker, the ANC hates the Western Cape because they don't govern it. And that is why they try to smear it every single day. And when the social media campaign to smear the Western Cape as a racist province and Cape Town as a racist city was at its height, the mayor and I discussed it, and we agreed, and she initiated a campaign with the slogan, "Don't let racists speak for you." We did something long before the Premier of Gauteng started speaking about it. And now there's a dedicated helpline. I'll give the ANC the number if they would like it, 021 400 1300. And this is, absolutely, I read numbers rather more quickly than their president, but I'll do it again, 021 400 1300. That is the dedicated hotline to complain about racism. And that's more than anyone in Johannesburg has done. And if there is a matter of serious racism, we refer it ourselves to the Human Rights Commission. So those 29 cases included cases that we referred ourselves. And then the mayor's campaign included a major outreach campaign, a social media campaign, a stakeholder campaign, and a range of other community engagements and interactions. And now, although they have a much worse race problem in Gauteng, according to the statistics of the Human Rights Commission, all Mukura does in what the Honourable Doug Moore calls a visionary speech is to put together an anonymous eminent persons group whose brief is completely unclear. And that's visionary to the Honourable the Opposition.
The Human Rights Commission is a Chapter 9 institution.
Order, please, members.
Almost every year, Madam Speaker, we hear a great deal about racism, and it's usually about racism in upmarket restaurants, the top restaurants. And they're restaurants that I very rarely go to because I don't believe in spending so much money on a meal when you can cook it for a tenth of the price at home. But the rumors reached such fever pitch that City Press published a survey by a black couple who went out actually looking for racism in Western Cape restaurants. They went looking for it. Their antennae were out. They wanted to find proof of racism in Western Cape restaurants. And they went to 14, that must have been a bloody nice assignment. They went to 14 upmarket restaurants looking for proof of racism in the Western Cape. And they could not find a single fault in 12 out of the 14. Not one. They were looking for it, remember? And the write-up of the remaining 2 indicates that perhaps one, at a stretch, might be construed as racist. And even if it was only 1 out of 14, one incident of racism is one too many. But to make a broad generalization about the Western Cape on a random sample of 1 is entirely unacceptable, Madam Speaker. We welcome such surveys because we don't want racism in this province. But why do these surveys only target the Western Cape, Madam Speaker? Why don't they do the same in Gauteng or KwaZulu-Natal, which, according to the Human Rights Commission, has a far worse problem than we do? You see, they just tokkel on their Ian Snar guitar. Just tokkel on their Ian Snar guitar. We support the Constitution and we reject racism. But the interesting thing, Madam Speaker, is that we heard the Honourable Kaya Magaka reverting back to the National Democratic Revolution. Now let's unpack this NDR, Madam Speaker. It sounds good, but you can capture it in 2 words, Madam Speaker: state capture. State capture. It is the abuse of cadre deployment to seize all levers of state power, including, in the ANC's own words, to seize the legislatures. They're howling here because they can't seize this one. Seize the legislatures, the executives. You heard what the Constitutional Court said about the executive at national level failing to fulfill its duty of oversight. It's because they've been captured, Madam Speaker. And then you have the public service. That's also been captured. That's why we can't build a capable state. The security forces, the judiciary. Fortunately, they haven't yet succeeded in capturing the judiciary. The parastatals, look what a mess they are, with various close friends of various prominent people in positions, and the Guptarization of all of our state-owned entities. The public broadcaster, and so on. And you know, Madam Speaker, not only is it good enough to stop at the capture of all these state institutions in the NDR, now we have the Zuptarization of very specific portfolios to turn our state into a criminal state. Madam Speaker, it was a total outrage that the Zupta friend, Mr. Zwane, was made the Minister of Minerals and responsible for mines. And then he went and helped facilitate the sale of one of the biggest coal mines to the Gupta family. That is a disgrace. That is Zupta capture of the state. And when we had the Des van Rooyen debacle, what lay just beneath that surface, Madam Speaker, was the Gupta confidants who entered the Treasury with Mr. van Rooyen to try and capture the Treasury. Zupta sought to capture the Treasury, and that was the Des van Rooyen debacle was about. So this is the logical conclusion of the National Democratic Revolution. It is the criminal state, and this party will make sure that South Africa is saved from the criminal state. Now, Madam Speaker, I was amazed. The ANC issued a statement after the State of the Province address, where they slammed the three concepts that I drew from in my speech. They slammed the rule of law, they slammed accountability, and they slammed the capable state. Can you believe it? The ANC went on record as rejecting these three critical concepts by calling them and rejecting the notion of, and I quote, the universalization of Western liberal democracy. And then the ANC referred to two models, various models around the world, but their models included Middle East and North Africa. Now, I know that the Honourable Magaka and Dugmore would much prefer the systems that have caused the decimation of societies in Syria and Libya and other countries drawn from their role model areas. But I hate to break the news to them.
Premier, Honourable Premier, please take your seat. Members, honourable members, I'm appealing to your judgment, your better judgment, to manage yourself in a way that lends dignity and decorum to this House. You know, an interjection is one thing, but laughing crassly at the back there, and especially to the three backbenchers of the opposition, it is inappropriate. We have viewers watching this, and what do ordinary South Africans think when they see this happening? I think we owe it to ourselves and our constituents to manage ourselves in a better way, in a more dignified and appropriate fashion, please. I can understand you have concerns and debate and issue points, but we really just need to compose ourselves here. Please, people, you may proceed, Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So I was at the point of describing the statement that the ANC released rejecting accountability, the rule of law, and the capable state. But I hate to be the one to break it to them. Our own constitution is firmly rooted in these three concepts. And they were not a colonial imposition, Madam Speaker. We defined and created that constitution ourselves as South Africans. But here they come and reject the constitution in favor of the NDR that favors state capture and the criminal state, which is why the National Prosecuting Authority is in the state it's in. And indeed, the Honourable Beerwinkel picked up the Honourable Magaka's theme when she said that our existence, this government's existence in this House, depends on the goodwill of the national government and the ANC. That's what she said. Madam Speaker, you see, that's how much they understand the Constitution, Madam Speaker. They say it is true. Let me tell the Honourable Magatla. Let me tell the Honourable Magatla. It has nothing to do with the goodwill of the national government. It has everything to do with the will of the voters. The fact that we are the government here has nothing to do with the ANC and everything to do with the Constitution and the will of the voters. Actually, the ANC help us by being so useless, but nevertheless, it is in fact due to the Constitution. You know, it's a great contradiction that the ANC often likes to claim credit for the Constitution, but they keep on undermining it at every turn. And in fact, it's contrary to our oath of office. When we come to this House, we swear to uphold the Constitution, Madam Speaker. I'll come to redress in a moment, and then you'll get a real fright, my friend. I did not forget to talk about it in my speech, but let me say quite frankly, Madam Speaker, when I come to redress, he's going to have egg all over his face. Let me warn him in advance. And this is where I agree with the Honourable Dugmore. Premier Makura is streets ahead of the Honourable Opposition in this House because at least he said that he supported the Constitution, unlike any of the opposition here. But one thing that the Honourable Makura left out of his speech was the economic crisis and the need for austerity measures. He didn't mention that anyway. As Minister Gordon emphasised so strongly in his budget speech yesterday. Now, of course, Honourable Makura couldn't go there because, according to preliminary estimates, Gauteng spent at least 4 million rand on their SOPA event. And the headline in the newspapers on Gauteng's SOPA event, may I read it to you, was this. The headline was this: satin, silk and shanks. Gauteng's SOPA menu fit for a king. That was the headline. And listen to that. Panko prawns, I've never even heard of them. Panko prawns, lamb shank, and a decadent duo of chocolate mousse will be served as part of the lavish menu for the Gauteng State of the Province address on Monday. The venue alone leaves nothing to be desired, as guests are seated at a luxuriously decorated marquee. The tables that seat 20 people each were lavishly decorated with satin and silk tablecloths and green and white fresh flowers. A feast fit for a king. A feast fit for a king of zesty tian smoked chicken layered with creamy avocado, etc., etc., etc. Then they go on and on and on about all this luxury, and they end up, the trio desserts include decadent chocolate mousse and deconstructed lemon meringue. Decadent and deconstructed sounds like a definition of the ANC, Madam Speaker. And at a very minimum, that cost 4 million rand. That cost at least 4 million rand. This is their austerity budget. And it was probably half of what they spent last SOPA, who knows? Maybe that was their austerity budget, Madam Speaker. But this was after Minister Gordon had said that all these extravagances have to stop, but they still carried on. And when questioned about this, a spokesman for the Gauteng government said, "Who can put a price on taking SOPA to the people?" Now, I can tell you that even though they had the SOPA in Sebokeng, I'm sure the good people of Sebokeng were not eating sushi, steak, shanks, and decadent chocolate duo. No, they weren't eating that. In contrast, Madam Speaker, we heard the national government's request for austerity measures and what you spent on everything in the SOPA, everything, was under 50,000 rand. Compare that to 4 million rand. We didn't have sushi and steak and shanks. We had sandwiches. We had sandwiches. And I'm just waiting for the ANC to find a racist angle in that. They're going to. They're going to say, you ask black people to come to the SOPA and then you only serve them sandwiches. That's racist. I'm waiting for that. Because that is the only argument they have left.
Order, please, members. There's too much noise in the chamber, both sides of the House.
Oh, yes.
Order, please, members. I'm appealing to both sides of the House. Can we have some calm? I'm talking to them. I'm talking to that side. I said both sides of the House, Honourable Mgaka. I said both sides. I am well aware of that, and I've requested both sides of the House to maintain calm. So if we may proceed. Order, please.
Speaker, can I just alert the Leader of the Opposition? This is not a time to tender.
Order. Honourable Premier, members, honourable members,
Tendering to leave early.
can we just have 5 seconds of silence, please? Yeah, chill. Honourable Olivier, you do have a choice. If you don't like what you hear, you can actually leave the chamber. You do have a choice, so you don't have to. Thank you. I'm not telling you what to do, but if your behavior is inappropriate, I will have to ask that you leave. Thank you.
Don't be shy now.
Honourable Premier, you may proceed.
I'm being told that I should stick to the debate on the state of the province. Well, in fact, they were the ones who raised Makura and his speech and his State of the Province address. I'm simply replying to it. I'm simply replying to it, and I'll come to another point now. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Magaka.
Order, please, members.
The Honourable Magaka also lambasted me for suggesting that the government should stick to the public sector wage increases for which we were told to budget, instead of the outrageously above inflation amount of 10% in the increases if one includes housing and medical aid benefits as well. Then he said here that it's obvious that I don't care about the workers and that I am anti-trade unions. Now, he knows that this is absolute nonsense, but he should listen to his own Secretary-General, Gwedi Mantashe, who gave a very important interview after the President's State of the Nation address, in which he said this. He said, COSATU cannot claim to represent the poor. That's what Gwedi Mantashe said. He said, they cannot claim to represent the poor because they do not represent the genuinely poor who are the unemployed. Then Gwedi said that it is time for government to start worrying about the unemployed first. And we say, hallelujah. He said unions represent people who have jobs, and the numbers of jobs are falling, and that is South Africa's biggest problem. So he said economic decline and the loss of jobs is what government has to turn to. And we are very, very glad that Gwedi Mantashe has got to the point that he agrees with the Democratic Alliance. But let me also say something else, Madam Speaker. Let me say something else. There was a very important research recently done by the Development Policy Research Unit at the University of Cape Town. And they were comparing wage levels, both at the median and mean wages of the public sector, and they concluded that in both instances, median and mean wages in the public sector, they are significantly higher than the private sectors. And that is quite an extraordinary conclusion to reach in a country that is in an economic crisis. And the article reaches the following conclusion. Now, I'd like the Honourable Magaka to listen to this. This is the conclusion. The post-2000 period has generated a new labour elite in the labour market, namely the unionised public sector employee. And these are the people who often, not always, they're excellent public servants, but these are many of the people who govern as if black lives don't matter. They are protected, new, unionised public sector elite. That is what they are called in the survey. And so, that is the big issue that we face, and they are precisely represented by the South African Democratic Teachers Union, or many, many of their teachers, who are, by the way, also trying to prevent poor learners in this province getting the benefit of the collaboration schools. But that is another story for another day. Now, we agree with the Honourable Mantashe that, in fact, our first priority has to be people who don't have jobs. And that's why we are doing everything we can in this province to create a climate through accountability and a capable state and the rule of law to grow jobs. And I have some statistics. You see, I'm sure the Honourable Dugmore had to run away because he's terrified that I'm going to come to the employment equity statistics, and I understand why he needs an excuse to run away, because that's what he's done. But hot off the press right today, Madam Speaker, are the statistics of the quarterly labour force survey. They were handed to me just before I came to this House. And Madam Speaker, listen to this. This is the quarterly labour force survey. And it tells us that in the past year, between the fourth quarter of 2014 and the fourth quarter of 2015, by far the highest job gains in the whole country were in the Western Cape. Just during the past year alone, now I could not believe these statistics, but I've double-checked them. Just over the past year, we created this province and the economy in this province 210,000 jobs in the year. And Madam Speaker, this means that employment in this province grew by 9.7% over the year. Can you believe it? These sound like Chinese and Indian rates of employment creation. 9.7% over the year.
It's better than China.
It's better than China. Greatly outperforming the national growth rate. And now listen to this, which I am really thrilled about. The Western Cape now also has the lowest narrow unemployment rate, and we are now below 20%, at 19.4%, which is absolutely significantly lower than any place in the country. But, Madam Speaker, it's also lower than the point at which we took office. And we are now in the deepest economic crisis, and the Western Cape, compared to the rest of South Africa, is growing jobs 9.7% in 1 year. You know, I have to revise the statistics that I gave in my SOPA. In the SOPA, I said that the economy in the Western Cape has added 200,000 jobs since 2009. Since today's labour force survey came out, Madam Speaker, we have added 337,000 jobs since 2009. That's how much the poor matter to us on this side. And no statistic could give me greater joy than that. And I'm sure the ANC will find a way of hanging a racist label onto my expression of joy about those employment results. But congratulations to everyone who was responsible for creating a climate for economic growth and job creation. So that was really extraordinary, and thank you very much indeed. Now, the ANC is always telling the world how unequal the city of Cape Town is. And, Madam Speaker, it is unequal. And it's far too unequal. And a narrow unemployment rate of 19.4% is still far too high, and we have to continue to bring it down. But indeed, when Africa Check heard that I had said that Cape Town was the least unequal city in South Africa. They didn't believe it, so they went to check it themselves. And this is their conclusion. And they quote from the most reliable source in the world. Presenting its conclusions, this is the 2011 United Nations Agency for Human Settlement, UN Habitat, the State of the World's Cities, 2010-2011. Presenting its conclusion, the report declared 3 South African cities top the list of the most unequal cities in the world when measured on income-based data gathered in a UN Habitat survey of cities in 109 countries from all regions. And it names the 3 most unequal cities in the world as Buffalo City, East London, I wonder who governs that city, then Johannesburg, I wonder who governs that city, and then Ekurhuleni, I wonder who governs that city. The 3 most unequal cities in the world, Madam Speaker. And then Africa Check concludes Cape Town, according to the statistics, is the least unequal city in the country. And you know, if it was measured today, Madam Speaker, we'd be further out in front, because the more jobs you create and the more people who are working and earning a salary, the less unequal the city becomes. But this is some bit of logic that seems to elude the members on the other side of the House. Now, I would like to thank the honourable colleagues that I have in the DA side for their excellent inputs in rebutting all of the allegations that came from the other side of the House. But I'm going to address one of them, because more disingenuous you can't get, Madam Speaker, and that was the Honourable Magaka saying that we are doing nothing about affordable housing. He couldn't have listened to a word I said, because one of our major game changers in this province is precisely a huge project to develop thousands of affordable housing opportunities. But it's interesting that again the national government disagrees with the ANC in this province, because just yesterday, and I don't suppose that if he didn't listen to my speech and he was in this House, he would have listened to the budget speech, but the Honourable Pravin Gordhan actually used the Western Cape's affordable inner-city housing program as an example for the rest of the country. What did he say? He singled out the Western Cape for commendation for actually making progress on inner-city development. And this is what he said. Cities are already taking steps to encourage higher land use density and inner-city redevelopment under the authority of the new Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act. This will unlock significant further private sector development potential across our cities, focused on strategic corridors. In Cape Town, the N2 Gateway housing program is continuing, together with redevelopment of the Voortrekker Road corridor, Conradie Hospital, the Athlone Power Station, and other sites. So, I've read the statement that I've got there. Now, we have sold one property, Madam Speaker, we have sold one property, which is a heritage building, and a former school, which is the Tafelberg School. And we have sold that to the highest bidder on the understanding that it cannot be knocked down and redeveloped. It can't be, because it's a heritage building. And that is the constraint on the land. And as I understand it, after my inquiries to Public Works, the buyer wants to keep it as a school. So it's absolutely misleading to suggest that it could be redeveloped by a wealthy investor for personal profit. It won't be. And that alternatively there could be 260 affordable housing opportunities that we could have developed there. Neither of these was ever an option. It is only feasible, Madam Speaker, to do cross-subsidized, well-located, low-cost housing if you have economies of scale. And that is why we are doing our best to get crucial pieces of land that are currently in the possession of the national departments and various parastatals, and also the National Department of Public Works, like Culemborg, like Wingfield, like Easterplaat, like Youngfield. Then we can really do massively cross-subsidized affordable housing at scale. And if the honourable members of the opposition are serious about affordable housing in the city, they will help us lobby their national counterparts to release that land so that we can build the houses that we need. But they aren't serious about it because when they had the opportunity to do something, they did absolutely nothing. In fact, when the Honourable Marius Fransman was the Minister of Public Works, what did he do? He sold the Conradi site to Eliza Elicha Investments, and he sold it for 80 million rand, although there were other bids that were much higher, one as high as 140 million. But he told an untruth and said that 80 million was the highest bid, when there was a bid for nearly double that amount. And by 2011, that was 5 years later, the consortium, the PELS, had only paid 8 million of the 80 million rand they owed. And despite the fact that they still owed 72 million rand, 6 years after the contract was signed, no interest was charged on the outstanding amount. Yeah. The interest clause had been deliberately left out of the deed of sale, and the sale was made to a consortium that was certainly not the highest bidder by any means. And the land lay and rotted there, the houses were vandalized, and now all those years later, it is left to us to redevelop that land for affordable housing. That is how disingenuous and disgraceful the ANC is. Now, Madam Speaker, I get to my next point, which is about the youth. Now, it is almost laughable that the ANC says we don't care about the youth. We are the only province, Madam Speaker, that does care. Almost all our game changers, from alcohol harms reduction to e-learning, to after schools, to special skills development, are specifically targeted at our youth. And the attempts to grow the economy shows that the result is outstanding because the number of discouraged work seekers is so low in this province. Now, you see, I just wish the Honourable Opposition had the slightest clue about the Constitution and the separation of party and state. I'm speaking here today as the Premier. When I say our youth, I mean every single young person in this province. I am not talking about the DA youth. I'm not like the ANC. I'm not like the ANC, who sees the National Youth Development Agency as an employment bureau for ANC youth leaders. We don't run government like this. But now,
Order, please, members.
I'll come to why we don't fund the NYDA in a moment, and you'll be embarrassed that you ever asked me to. Where do I want to work with them? I was absolutely fascinated by this latest 2015 National and Provincial Youth Labour Market statistical release, and it said, discouraged work seekers per province in terms of the youth. In the Western Cape, 1.2%. 1.2%, significantly lower than any other province. And that is from the National Statistics South Africa. Now, the ANC's definition about caring for the youth, and the Honourable Opposition keeps plugging it in this House, is to pour money down the bottomless cesspit of the National Youth Development Agency. Let me say this about the National Youth Development Agency. It has actively undermined youth development. That's what it's done. I could not believe the summary of its wasteful expenditure. In 2015-16, the National Youth Development Agency was allocated a budget of 409 million rand, Madam Speaker, consuming 57% of the entire presidency's budget. And it prioritized lavish parties and personal enrichment over the actual development of the youth. More than a quarter of this went to paying salaries. In fact, over 45% of it went to paying salaries. And the Chief Executive Officer of the National Youth Development Agency, Yurshin Pillay, earns 1.8 million rand a year. Almost what the President earns, despite no tangible outputs from the agency. Now, I could not believe the amount that they spent on travel and accommodation in 1 year. 28 million rand on travel and accommodation for the National Youth Development Agency. Who can forget the Kissing Festival? Remember that? 106 million rand on a kissing festival? And the NYDA also made headlines last year after an independent probe uncovered that at least 2 senior managers, both earning over 1 million rand a year, had misrepresented their qualifications. And what did they do? They weren't disciplined. The one of them was just neatly transferred to the presidency and kept his 1.2 million rand a year salary. I could go on and on and on, but I presume that the Honourable Magaka is so worried about the NYDA because it is a site of struggle between control of the ANC Youth League and the Young Communists League. And at the moment, the Young Communists League have seized control of the NYDA, and I am sure that the Honourable Magaka, who never stood for election as a communist, but is nevertheless his primary hat that he wears, I'm sure that he's desperate to prevent the ANC Youth League from trying to reconstitute the board and take over the NYDA again. But that's what's going down over there. You see, it's state capture again. It's the National Democratic Revolution, Madam Speaker. Now, let's get to farm workers. We had the Honourable Bierwinkel saying that this government and the Western Cape does not care about farm workers. This is about farm workers, now I've moved on. I said every one of our game changers and almost everything I said in our SOPA is targeted at the youth. I can read my SOPA again if you would like to hear what we're doing for the youth. I can read. You were outside most of the time talking to 35 people. Your mass rally outside.
Please.
The study found, now I'm now talking about farm workers, and the Honourable Bierwinkel said that farm workers in the Western Cape are worst off, etc., etc. Now listen to this. This is a report in the Sowetan from the 28th of January 2016. And they're reporting on a study that was done in the UCT Labour and Enterprise Working Group, who briefed Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Rural Development. And this is where the statistics come from, a briefing to the National Parliament. The study found that farm workers in the Western Cape were by far the best paid in the country. Farm workers in the Free State are paid 24% less than their Western Cape counterparts. Workers in Mpumalanga, 25% less. Eastern Cape farm working wages are 30% less. KwaZulu-Natal is 31% under Western Cape levels. And in Limpopo, they are fully 51% below Western Cape farm worker levels. So sweep before your own door, before you come and make false allegations here. Chayela kwakho. I don't know what Germany has got to do with South Africa. But Germany actually has a capable state accountability and the rule of law, Madam Speaker, and that is why the economy is booming. And that is the lesson that they can learn on the honourable opposite side of this House.
Order, please, members. There's too much noise.
Now the Honourable Dugmore's back just in time for me to be able to speak about employment equity, because we all know that the Honourable Dugmore is more Catholic than the Pope on employment equity. And he came here and said that I allegedly don't take employment equity seriously. I don't take it seriously, he said, which therefore gives this entire province, private and public sector, leeway to not take it seriously. Now, I asked them to draw the statistics for my office, because he was basically saying a fish rots from the head. If I and my office don't take it seriously, no one else will. Well, these are the statistics, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Dugmore made a big thing of the designated groups. Here you have them. Employment equity, the designated groups in my office are 92%. My office is 92%. You said because I don't take it seriously, and my only place that I have control over The
Order,
only place
please.
that I have control over is my office. 92%. And indeed, when you compare black to any other race, it is 76%. So we have got the most incredibly diverse office. Now, Madam
Order,
Speaker,
please,
let me
members.
come to the Honourable Dugmore, because he is the one who is still howling, and I want to come to the Honourable Dugmore.
Order, please.
I want to talk a little bit.
Order, members, honourable
I want to talk a little
members.
bit about the Honourable Dugmore, because he was once the Education MEC, wasn't he? He was once the Education MEC. And he's always talking about how visionary his party is on employment equity. Well, I thought I would draw the statistics of the Honourable Schaefer's statistics in top management and his own. And I looked at Education MEC Dugmore's final year when he'd had time to do something about it in office in 2008, and our latest Department of Education Equity stats as at the 29th of January 2016. In short, I've summarised all the statistics here. Top management in the Western Cape from designated groups today is at 92%, compared to 66% under the Honourable Dugmore. Compared to 66% under the Honourable Dugmore. And if you combine top and senior management levels, 13 to 16, if you combine the top and the senior management levels, we come in at 83% now, compared to Honourable Dugmore's 77%. And even, he's been howling now about removing any whites from the equation. Even if we remove white females from our top management. Why would we want to do that? Well, you want to do that because you're talking about black now and you're saying...
Order, please.
Well,
Premier, please engage
I'm
the
quite
chair.
happy to stick with the statistic of 92% versus 66% under him if he wants me to. But even if we control for white females, we still come out ahead in terms of top management. We still come out ahead in terms of top management. So before they come and wail here, they must just check that their statistics...
Order, please.
You see, the Honourable Dugmore is going to deny that he said I'm lying again, because Hansard may well not pick it up because his microphone is not on.
Premier.
But I heard as clearly as I did the first time what he said.
Okay, so on Chief Opwali,
If that could be referred to Hansard,
Okay.
please. Unfortunately, I never heard it. But
if you can take your seat.
well, if he did, then he must.
Sorry,
Then, Speaker, then I must ask, if this is the second time then today that they've admitted that, but they don't apologise
Chief
and
Whip.
withdraw.
Thank you. I heard Honourable Dugmore. I've heard the Honourable Dugmore say that he said it, and it is only appropriate for me to ask Honourable Dugmore, will you withdraw that statement, please?
I will withdraw it.
Thank you. Order, please, members.
You see, Madam Speaker, lots of people don't hear the interjections. You often don't hear.
Order,
The
please.
Honourable Chief Whip doesn't hear. I hear them. And often they don't get captured in Hansard because his microphone is not on. But I hear very carefully what he says. But Cameron, the Honourable Dugmore says the national government is very good at employment equity and black economic empowerment and various other things, but he forgets to mention what deals those are. I've got a whole list. I could read them out the whole afternoon. But one of the famous ones was when there had to be a 25 million rand bribe by Goldfields to secure the mining license, and that 25 million rand had to be handed over to a top network in the ANC for Goldfields to get a mining license. That is BEE, ANC style. Corruption and the criminal state, covered by the fig leaf of BEE. And if that is the kind of BEE, it was a fact. It was all over the newspapers, if you've forgotten. No, let me tell you this. A New York law firm Paul Weiss drew that conclusion because Goldfields appointed them.
Order, please.
I can
members.
tell you that if it hadn't been true, he would have been sued. If people make defamatory statements and you don't sue them, then you accept that they're correct. New York law firm Paul Weiss reviewed the deal. The firm found the mining company had increased Mbete's stake in the deal in response to a threat by her representative. According to the report, Mbete's representative, Brian Mosehla, had threatened to scuttle the deal unless Mbete was given a bigger stake. That is a 25 million rand bribe to secure the mining license. BEEANC style, Madam Speaker. And if he's expecting us to do that, we are not going to do that. The biggest empowerment that you can do for anyone is give them a good education and ensure that they can get a job. ANC, NDR empowerment is corrupt. It's based on corruption. Now I'm coming to the Honourable Ferlin Christians. Ferlin Christians, the Honourable, made some
Order,
very
please,
important
members.
points.
There's too much noise.
He asked, will broadband be linked to after-schools programs? Yes, they will. E-learning is one of the 4 pillars of our MODS program operating from schools, and they will all hopefully be connected by the end of 2016, and many of the libraries are already connected in our MODS centres. We will capitalize on existing interest from learners, and statistics at libraries to date show 70 million hits, 59 million page views, and over 2.5 terabytes of information. So definitely, Honourable Christians, that is part of the MOD centres. What you're saying about SATU and working in the after-school program, instead of dropping their children off at Model C schools where there is an after-school program run by teachers that belong to other unions, in fact, then they don't help us make the after-schools program work in schools where other children go to school. I couldn't agree with the Honourable Ferlin Christians more. Youth cafes, yes, there will be more. We're looking to launch 2 more youth cafes by the Department of Social Development in the next couple of months, in Oudtshoorn, that's in April, and at Nyanga Junction at the end of March. And then we will also launch a youth cafe in Vrygrond in partnership with an NGO. I agree with alcohol harms reduction as a focus, and that there is a contradiction with the extension of liquor trading hours, and I have to agree very much with him, and that's why we're working closely with the neighbourhood watchers to monitor closely the violations of trading hours that happen out there. Now, I come to the Honourable Bernard Joseph, who isn't here. He probably with his comrades in the Northwest who are at the moment cheering on the burning down of campuses. But in his absence, I suppose that's also transformation, EFF style. I would like to say to the Honourable Joseph that he chose the worst example. He chose the very worst example, and I'm using it here because the ANC also used an example that we were neglecting Nyanga. Well, I can't tell you how much money we have pumped into Nyanga to ensure that young people have alternatives to crime, drugs, and alcohol. In fact, not only have we pumped enormous amounts into it, and I was amazed to see that, and now this is probably be racist as well, I'm amazed to see that our alternative entertainment programs over weekends have been drawing up to 1,700 youth on a weekend, which is quite extraordinary. They started off with 300 youth per weekend. They're now pushing up to 1,700 youth per weekend. It's movies, it's games, it's bingo, it's open mics, it's all of these wonderful activities that our youth don't have to go and sit in shebeens and drink, and basketball and boxing and a whole range of other things. And 17 young adult service coordinators and role models in Nyanga, and we pay them through the EPWP program. But the Honourable Plato has also got another very important project, which is that 250 youths from Nyanga alone have been selected at Northlink to continue their further technical studies, which is absolutely amazing. And then we have 4 church groups in Nyanga who do the holiday support and youth safety programs, and they get lots of money supported from us, and then 62 pairs of safety boots and 12 rechargeable torches, and 62 people have been trained in the Neighbourhood Watch training program in Nyanga. So this is just one example of what we're doing to empower communities to fight crime. Madam Speaker, I was very disturbed at the quality of the ANC's inputs to this debate. They didn't engage in any way with our State of the Province address. They drew out old statements that could have been made 15 years ago. Their Ian Snar guitar plays on only one theme, race, and they find it everywhere. But on every single point they made, Madam Speaker, if you just go and look up their own statistics from the national government, it is usually the exact opposite of what the ANC claims the truth is. They're a disgrace for an opposition, and that is why the rest of the country is also turning against them now. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, that concludes the debate on the Premier's State of the Province address. That concludes the business for the day, and the House is adjourned.